Okay, so here is our walkthrough of creating a virtual machine in Azure. What we're going to do is go to portal.azure.com and we're going to sign in with our student email address. Then you have all the different Azure resources that you can create. And what we're going to do is we're going to select a virtual machine. Now it's going to take us to this page where it shows us all of the virtual machines that we have running. If there's nothing there, that's okay. We're going to make one. We're going to hit create. And we're going to do Azure Virtual Machine. Okay, now this should all look familiar. We're going to select our subscription. In this case, it's Azure for Students. Resource group, we can do create new here. And we'll call this demo. Okay. Virtual machine name, I'm going to call this demo VM. Demo VM. There we go. For the region, I'm going to leave the default. You can select whatever region best suits your needs. For availability options, remember we talked about availability zones, scale sets, and availability sets. In this case, I'm not going to do any redundancy. We're going to go ahead and delete this right after. I don't really need it. So next we'll choose an image. In this case, it's Ubuntu. And yeah, because it's x64, x64 is already selected here. Now for size, you can see this, it shows you recently used sizes, and there's also recommended sizes for that machine type. I'm going to just go ahead and use a recently used one. It doesn't really matter. Again, we're going to delete this, but go back and review the lecture where we talked a lot about the machine sizes. I think that'll be really helpful. All right, for our administrator account, we'll use SSH public key. For our username, we'll use Azure user. We're going to generate a new key pair, and we're going to give the key pair a name. So in this case, demo VM key. Okay, for inbound port rules, I'm going to allow a couple. I'm going to allow HTTP and SSH. Remember that SSH port 22 is what we're going to use for SSHing to the machine. And then port 80 is what we're going to use when we type in the IP address of that machine in a URL browser bar so that we can see the Nginx homepage that we are going to create. So next we'll go to disks. We talked a lot about disks and disk encryption. I'm just going to leave the defaults here. So we've got the premium SSD. For key management, we'll use the platform managed key. You can do your own managed keys. We can talk about that in our security deep dive. All right, you can add a new disk for a new data disk. You need to add additional storage for your application. Next, we'll go to networking. It's going to create a virtual network for us. Let's do the default subnet. When we talk about networking, we'll talk about subnets. And then for public IP, we're going to do demo VM IP. You can also just like create a new one if you want to and give it a name. It's going to by default give you a static IP, which is really nice. And it'll give you some routing preferences. But again, we'll talk about those when we talk about networking. We've already selected our inbound ports. So we've already allowed HTTP and SSH. And this says this will allow all IP addresses to access your virtual machine. So this means that any IP address anywhere in the internet can either SSH to this machine if they have the private key, or they can hit that machine via HTTP traffic, which is what we want, right? Because we're creating a demo web server. When the VM is deleted, we're going to go ahead and delete the public IP and the network interface card. Yeah, and then let's go back over to management. So we're not going to use IAM for this demo, but we're going to talk a lot more about that. You can enable auto shutdown. So basically, this is just going to auto shut down your machine. If we click that, it's going to give you times where you can shut it down automatically. And you can set up notifications for when to shut it down. We can do enabling backups. So if we click that, then we can set up standard backups or enhanced backups. We don't need backups for this machine because we're going to delete it. And then guest OS updates. So you can handle patching however you want to. So for the guest OS, remember that the guest means the virtual machine that you're running. You can do Azure orchestrated patching. That's really helpful because it's going to patch in a sequence across your redundant virtual machines. And so it'll help manage your availability for the applications that are being served by that machine. Or you can just do the image default. So you will go in and like manually patch it. Or if you have other kind of patch monitoring setup, patch management setup. All right, for monitoring, we're going to skip alerts, but we did talk about alerts a little bit. And then advanced, we're not going to install any extensions this way. We're just going to go ahead and tab over to tags. We can use key value pairs again for tags for our resources. In this case, I'm not really going to. And then we can do review and create. It's going to give us a warning that we have SSH open to the internet, which is actually what we want, so that's okay. And then review some of the key pieces of our virtual machine, and then we can go ahead and hit create. We're going to download the private key and create the resource. Okay, now it says deployment is in progress. And while we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen sharing so that we can look at a terminal. And I'm going to share my whole window. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, once we have the message that our deployment is complete, which is great, we're going to do a couple of things. So first, I'll put my terminal window over here. We're going to go to the resource. And we're going to go over to connect. Now here's our public IP, which is great. Let's go to more options and reset password or keys. I'm going to reset the password for Azure user. Can be whatever you want. Oh, no, it enforces some password requirements, which is probably a good thing. That is not strong enough. All right, then we're gonna update. Okay, once that's updated, then we can go ahead, go back over to connect. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to our terminal, and I'm going to do SSH-I. I'm going to use our tilde, our squiggly line. And then I'm going to go to downloads. And then we called this demo VM underscore key.pem. And then we're going to connect as Azure user at 20.25.177.200, or whatever IP address is a public IP address of the machine that you just created. I hit enter. It's going to say, yeah, enter the, oh, bad permissions. Oh, you know what? I did not chmod this. So permission denied, try again. Okay, we can cd into our downloads. If you're on Mac, you need to do this. If you're on Windows, you don't. And I'm going to do chmod 400 demo VM key.pem. All right, now we can go back to our home directory, or we could stay in the downloads directory and just run it from there. And now we're going to do SSH-I. We can do downloads, and then demo VM underscore key.pem Azure user at 20.25.177.200. Great. Now we are actually on our VM, which is awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do sudo apt-get update. Now it's going to ask for the Azure user password that we just set back in the portal. It's going to update our Ubuntu packages, which is great. Now we're going to do sudo apt-get install nginx. Great. So it looks like nginx installed. Now we're going to go back over to our browser. We're going to copy that public IP to our clipboard. We're going to open a new tab. And we're going to navigate to it. Then we get the welcome to nginx default homepage, which means we set it up correctly. We now have an nginx server running on an Azure virtual machine. And that's how we do with Azure.